All right, good morning, everybody. We've got lots of classrooms here in session here today. We've got Forest Grove and Bridgeview and Burlington. And I see we've got Allison here with us this morning. So welcome, Allison. And I'm sure Claire will be joining here in just a few minutes here. And so we are really excited for this opportunity to connect and learn from you today, Allison, and then obviously Claire when she jumps on. And before we get into the action of character design and all this good stuff, as we start to all transition into taking our ideas and making an outline and start to move into storyboard, I was wondering, Allison, if you could take a second to introduce who you are, what you do, and just some context to your craft. And hello there, Claire. We just started underway here with some introductions, so right on time. So Allison, we'll start with you to introduce yourself.
Thanks so much, Aaron. I'm really excited to be chatting with everyone today. My name's Allison O'Toole. I'm a comics editor. What that means is I work with creators, so writers, artists, all the different parts of the comics making team to make sure that their story gets from an idea to a finished product. So we'll talk about their ideas, we'll help them refine those. But my job is also a lot of the less exciting stuff, like organizing files and make sure things get to from one person to the next, making sure we hit deadlines, all that important stuff. So I work a little bit with mainstream comics, with publishers like Image Comics and Dark Horse Comics that folks might have heard of, if you're comics readers. And I also do some self-publishing, which means that I print the books, I send the books to people, I do all that stuff. And most recently I did a book called Shades of Fear, which is a collection of short horror comics with a focus on color. And so I'm really excited to, in the latter half of the presentation today, get you thinking a little bit about color and how we can use that in a story, and more than just showing what a scene looks like, how we can use it to evoke emotion and that sort of thing. So I'm really excited to be chatting with everyone today.
Well, we're really excited to have you part of this.
Oh, Aaron, I think you might be muted, but I imagine that we'd love to hear from Claire as well.
Oh, there we go. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah. Yes, there we go.
We've got like two computers going on here, so I think we got it squared away here. So, all right. So, sorry about that. Claire, welcome. I know it's not morning for you, but if you could introduce who you are and a little bit about what you've got going on and some of the work that you have happening. You've got some exciting stuff going on here as well.
Always. Hi, I'm Claire Napier, and I'm also a comics editor, but I'm freelance entirely, unlike Allison. I don't work with publishers, I work with creators, which generally means that I do most of the things that she said, but I don't have to worry about files or deadlines. So I prefer it a little bit because it's all about the creative side when you're fully freelance. Yeah, I've done a whole variety of things. Maybe probably what you're most likely to have heard of are the things that I've done with Henry Burroughs at Image. Helm Grey Castle and La Voz de Mayo Tata Rambo, both of which are great books. If you see them, you should pick them up.
Awesome. So we are really excited to have both of you here today. And I know we're undergoing this process, and we were trying to figure out last year when we were telling someone else's story. We got to work with you, Claire, and we're really excited now to have not just your genius brain, but bringing Allison in here as well. And so really, we're just going to pass the baton on to you. I know we've been talking a little bit behind the scenes, but a lot of this focus here, I think, is we talked about a little bit, Allison, you mentioned color and character. We are in this phase right now, and people are kind of different stages, but just so you are aware, we're sorting through the facts. We're starting to figure out how are we going to tell the story? What is the actual story we want to tell? And eventually trying to figure out what will be told through words and what will be told visually, really make Michel's stories pop. We have a lot of information. Now it's trying to make it come to life. And so that's where we we hand over to you, we virtual high five, but you guys help us with some thinking and so some opportunities to think through that because that is definitely your trade and craft, and you help people do that very thing. So I will set the stage over to you and let you work your magic.
Super. First of all, I think that Alice and I would both like to know, how many of you guys read comics? About, what's that, about half? Cool. And of the rest of you, do you watch cartoons? Or play video games, things like that? I think so. So when we're talking about these things, because all of those things are, they're visually related, they're all about expression and storytelling and clarity. So when we talk about the things that we're going to talk about, try, if you can, to remember times when you've seen these things being used in comics or in cartoons or etc. And also, if you would like to, while you're listening, do feel that you can do a little doodle or a little sketch or note down some ideas or have a go at designing something that we're talking about. Anything that makes it fun or interesting is good. So absolutely go for it if you want to. Right, Allison?
Yes, I think because we're going to be working on a biography story, maybe you can start to think about drawing some things from your own life, because that's essentially what you're doing with this project, right? You're drawing things from Michel's life. So to get you starting thinking about that while you're listening today, while you're thinking today, if you want to start imagining you're drawing your own biography, you can start to draw people in your life or places or maybe your pets. But feel free to be drawing, scribbling, getting ideas from your own life, even while you're thinking about how we'll apply this to Michel's story, because there's a lot there. You'll find that they can be pretty related, the ways that you'll tell his story and your own.
Absolutely. And you don't have to do this. And no one's going to look at what you've drawn. And it's just going to be for your reference. So don't feel that this is like a big challenge. It's just have a go and see what you come up with. Okay. This is an introduction to general visual storytelling. There are lots of ways to tell a story. Many storytellers, including you, choose to use images, as I said, in movies, in comic books, to adverts on the side of a bus or on a billboard. And this is because images can mean something to almost anyone. If you look at an image, you can feel what it might mean even if you can't read the text that's next to it. People who speak different languages can look at the same pictures and still feel the same emotions, because behavior and body language is often very similar between cultures and between people and even between households. And so when we use imagery, we're sort of taking a shortcut to emotion and to meaning and to, well, all the kinds of things that emotions can make us feel beyond just themselves. Like, you can be happy about something and that can make you feel excited, or you can be sad about something and that can make you feel interested. And Michel's story is going to have a lot of emotional elements, but what we want to do is take those emotional elements and turn them into something that makes people really want to think about them. So when we're creating an image for a story, the first thing to decide is what's most important at the point in the story that you're creating the image for. What's the feeling? What's the focus? What's the meaning? Is it something about a character? Is it about something that they're feeling, or someone that the narrator loved? Or is it about something that they saw or ate or touched or smelt? Or is it about a place? If you read a sentence in a book, the sentence will be about something. If you read a paragraph in a book, the paragraph will be about something, but it won't necessarily mean that you want to put everything in that paragraph into a picture. Just the most important things, the most vital things, or the most interesting or emotionally stimulating things. That, deciding what that is, helps you decide what the focus of your picture will be. And once you have the focus for the picture, what do you want the viewer to feel about them? Should they be glad or sad or shocked or scared? And how do you combine those two elements, the thing that it's about and the way that the reader or the viewer should feel about them? Does anyone have any questions already? I can't see the room at the moment, so I can't tell.
I'm not seeing any hands raised, which I think we can just use. We'll just use standard classroom rules. If you do have a question, you can throw your hand up and we'll call on you, but I'm not seeing any right now.
Super. Where have we got to then?
So Claire, as you were talking about that, maybe one question as you're thinking about those two elements, what's most important in the feeling, as you guys like receive different pieces of graphic novel work or comic work, you know, someone that you're looking at to give that feedback, are there common mistakes or common things that tend to stand out that maybe as we are starting to segue into there that we maybe jump the curve and just keep in the back of our mind that you guys see like maybe time and time again? Like, no offense to the people themselves, but oftentimes you get so immersed in your own ideas in your brain that trying to express that out to someone who hasn't seen the work, or in our case, not everybody has read Michel's story. Are there some things that we should keep in mind, or hopefully I'm not stealing your thunder for later stuff, that we might be able to think about?
Well, I can think of one immediately, but Allison, what about you?
Yeah, the one I can think of, I think a lot of, actually, no, I would say off the top of my head, thinking about ways that your image doesn't just have to be a picture of a person. So there are a lot of different ways to show how someone is feeling. And I think that Michel talks about a lot of things. Like he's really interested in cars. I don't know if anyone else noticed that, but he talks about cars a lot. And so I think that there are things that we can look at that might be important to him in this particular story, that we don't, even though the story is about him, we don't have to make all of the pictures be about him. And I think sometimes with comics, particularly where you're going to have, 5 or more pictures on a page, you don't necessarily want every single picture to be just someone talking. That gets really boring. So thinking about other things we can show that might evoke a similar feeling or can tell us about the characters, I think can be sometimes a stronger visual decision that not everyone makes.
Yeah, I was going to say the urge to draw something that looks real rather than to draw something that looks emotive. Sometimes people get quite fixated on drawing the right anatomy or a face that looks the same in this panel as it did in the last panel. And that's just not as important as making sure that whatever face or whatever image in every panel looks meaningful and looks emotionally informative and includes the information that the story needs. So, for example, just off the top of my head, if there is a particularly upsetting moment for Michel, then perhaps instead of trying to draw him looking very upset, which might not be something that a person wants to see, a drawing of their own face looking upset, that might be upsetting again for him. If there were a car in the scene, you could give that car a face. You could make the car as upset as he feels in order to express his feeling through a sort of a proxy. I don't know if you know that word, I'm sorry. But through a different object that still gets across the feeling of the scene and doesn't have to be drawn exactly as a human being is drawn, because human beings are very hard to draw. Mm-hmm. Honestly, cars are also very hard to draw. But
that's true. It maybe wasn't the best example.
Old-fashioned cars, they might be a little bit easier. They'll be more simplified shapes and so on. So maybe you can look into that kind of thing.
And by that same example, another thing you could do is a lot of the story takes place like in the forest, right? He talks a lot about where they were hiding. So maybe to show that he was upset. We could show a really heavy shadow over the trees. We could make it feel very dark. We could make it feel very frightening and close and sad, right? So thinking about those other ways that we can show emotion without having to draw something that's very difficult.
Yeah, looking for shortcuts that mean that you don't have to do things that are too hard is honestly one of the major lessons that you need to learn as a comics creator. Cartooning, which is what we call the creation of comics, cartooning is all about finding the simplest way to express something complicated. And that might be something physical, it might be something emotional, but I mean, I don't know if you guys know Popeye cartoons. Probably not, because they're very old. But the way that Popeye punches someone is just ridiculous. You don't see it in real life, but it looks like how it feels to be punched. He's found a way to draw not exactly how the fist hitting the face looks, but he's found a way to show what it feels like to be walloped. And that's important. That's what makes a product, which a comic can be, that's what makes it last, what gives it longevity, is what makes it communicative. So always just give it a whirl. Don't try and get it perfect. Try and get it communicative. Whew, where are we?
I think we were actually about to start looking at drawing characters and how started. We're going to backtrack a little bit now because our conversation kind of went in that direction. But I can share, we've got some images for you to look at, so you're not just looking at our faces the whole time. I'm going to see if I can, this is what I want to share. Can everyone see that okay? Great.
Yeah.
So Claire, I think you were going to talk about like character and emotion and how people can be used to demonstrate emotion at the most base level.
So as we've just been telling you not to draw people, but one of the easiest ways to communicate emotions in a picture is to draw people, or at least to draw representations of people, which it can be a car. It doesn't have to be a face. But if you draw a face, however detailedly you do, it's going to have an expression. That's just how the human mind works. We see expressions in things. So when we see them in comics, we read them. We understand what they're trying to tell us because they're trying to tell us things that we felt before. So if look at the top left example here, this yellow smiling face. How does that guy feel?
What do you guys think?
You say it again because I did not hear. I'm sorry.
It can be a little bit louder.
Happy. There we go. Happy. Easy peasy, right? What about Snoopy there, the bottom left? How does he feel? Happy. Right. It's a different way of drawing the same thing, but they're both very clear about what feeling is being represented. So you can do it just by having a very simple face at the top, or you can do it by having a whole body that's given over to the same emotion. What about Batman? How does Batman feel here?
Angry.
How do you know? Right.
Very intense face.
Very intense face. If you look at the details, they're all intense together. So you know he's feeling something really strongly. You don't know exactly what he's angry about or shouting about, but you know that he really, really means it. Whereas this guy at the top right, who I can't quite see because the little zoom icon is over. Can you guys see him? Her?
Yes, we can.
So how does she feel?
Weary, shocked,
Anxious,
flustered.
Good, yeah. One thing I think that we should notice about this image up here is that the emoji and the figure express their feelings slightly differently. What can you point out that is different between the emoji and the figure, the drawing of the figure?
One, the emoji is reacting to something external. Yeah. And the character, the girl's here is internal.
That is an interesting answer. It wasn't what I had in mind, but sure, yeah, that's a great point of thought. What I would have expected was the motion lines. Do you see those around her? The little white lines on either side of the figure. They are telling us more than what is contained within the drawing of the figure. They're telling us how she's moving. The emoji doesn't have that. The emoji just has the big eyes and the big mouth and the hands up to the face and the blue color coming down, because that's how it feels when you're really shocked. You feel like a chill coming down. But in the full figure, there's less, it doesn't have that color coming down. So the feeling has to be expressed in a different way. And it's done through motion lines. It shows that she's shaking. Because in comics, you can't have anything that's actually moving. So you just have to draw how you are supposed to imagine that they're moving. You can do all kinds of things with motion lines. You can tell that someone's moved from here to here. You can tell that someone's moving within a confined space. You can tell when something suddenly appeared, if there are a lot of lines around them like that. I'm sure that you've all seen many, many kinds of motion lines in manga. And if you do read manga, then after you go away today, why don't you have a look, see how many different kinds of motion lines there are and what kinds of feelings and what kinds of actions they're signifying. It will be really, really useful, and you'll get lots of really good tips that you can share with everybody else. So we've gone over expression and a little bit about movement, but we can also think about shape and size. These guys here, they all represent a feeling, and that representation is done through what they look like. Now, often I think an angry character would be shown as being very big, like the Hulk. He's angry, so he gets big. But in this case, this guy is small on the right, the red guy. He's angry and he's small. Why do you think they chose to do that? Just have a guess. Was that an answer? I'm sorry, the sound is not perfect here.
Maybe to bring more attention to the character.
Yeah, exactly. When something's unexpected, then it's a surprise. And when it's a surprise, you notice it. So you can take obvious decisions to get obvious results, and that's great. And you can also take unexpected decisions to get unexpected results, and that's also great. You can have a combination. It depends which kind of decision you prefer. You might want to do all obvious, or you might want to do all surprising, or you might want to do a mix. But all of these are creative decisions that you can definitely be thinking about. Another thing that you can consider is not so much size, but shape. For example, we associate danger with sharp edges because sharp edges are dangerous. It makes sense. We know that a picture can't hurt us, but we know that a picture of something that could hurt us is a bit scary because it's communicating something harmful. It's communicating something dangerous. And that's the fun of images, that they can communicate things that we don't actually have to experience, but we can just enjoy because they're not really here. We're just looking at them. So Bowser, he's spiky. He's spiky everywhere because he's the villain. Usually he's coming to get you and he's going to make a ruckus. Whereas Mario is very rounded because he's the comforting character who you play with, and he makes you feel happy and good and that you can win the game and be successful. These kinds of quite simple decisions about what shape to make a character can really inform the way that people feel about your story. So if you have a scene where there's someone hostile or an enemy, which may well be the case in this story, consider how you're going to make them look dangerous or frightening, or perhaps you'll decide you want to make them look not dangerous, because then it'll be surprising when they are. It all comes down to what you think is the most communicative and what you think is the most important and what you think is the most fun for you as a creator. Because if you're not having fun while you're making a story, then you won't be able to put too much energy into it, and that would be a shame.
I think I can hop in here to segue into some similar ideas, unless there was anything else you wanted to get out, Claire, on this slide. So the next few images we're going to look at are we're going to expand a little bit on some of what Claire was talking about, where we have these spikier shapes and things like that can be a little bit more frightening, they can be more intense, whereas we have rounder shapes that are more comforting, they're more inviting. But I also want to look at, in addition to the characters, how we can look at that even in the environments and the things that are around the figures and around the focus, and how all of those elements can be used together to communicate a feeling. So in addition to like the spiky shapes like we're seeing on Bowser, we can think about how slanted angles can give you a similar effect, whereas things that are horizontal, so just straight across, or vertical, straight up and down, feel more grounded, they feel more solid. And so on the same note as Super Mario, has just a show of hands, have folks played any Super Mario games? We're familiar with these? Yes, okay, fantastic. So I think we would look at this image and we'd say, this looks pretty comforting, right? This looks like a fun place that you'd want to spend some time. So what are some ways that this image feels like a nice place, a happy place?
The characters.
There's not like spikes.
Very bright, rounded.
Got a lot of shadows.
The characters having eyes.
I feel like
Mm-hmm.
it's like a grassy meadow, and there's not like, because like in the other levels there's like spikes in the background rather than like nice hills.
And the clouds have eyes.
And the clouds, yes. So lots of great ideas in there. So you're right. We have some cute eyes on the clouds and on the little boxy shapes. Everything's very rounded, even the kind of mountain shape. It's very round. It's very comforting. All of the colors are very bright. So those are all really great points that you'll also see. This is just a different game, but with similar things, right? We're seeing that the shapes are still very round. And I chose this image because we can see the way that the characters are moving from left to right across. It's all very much like a straight line. Sometimes they'll bounce, but we're not seeing them at big heroic angles or very frightening, intimidating angles of where your camera is. And if that doesn't make sense, I think it might when we compare it to some different video games. From here, you can see, I'd love to hear your opinions as well, but just to start, if you imagine that you're holding a camera, you're taking this picture, you're standing very low on the ground, right? Because you can see the bottoms of the character's feet and you're looking upwards toward the castle. But in comparison to the Super Mario images, this doesn't feel inviting, right? This feels more intimidating, more scary. And so looking at this image, what are some ways that we can tell that this is a scary place?
It's dark. On fire.
Yeah, it's ominous.
More detailed.
You can't really see inside, so that could give you like.
Yeah, it's really foggy also. The guy's holding a sword, like visibility. There's no real like sun or anything. The guy's holding a sword. He has a bow and arrow.
Everything's going to the back of the fire. Like kind of
That's awesome. I heard so many great points in there. The character is holding a sword. We can see some fire. It's obscured by fog, so we can't really see inside. There's a lot more detail in the image. There's a lot more spiky shapes, right? And again, we have these slanted angles. So you're just even intuitively, you can just look and you can feel that these kinds of environments are scary, right? So it's a similar kind of thing here. We're not seeing those nice warm greens and blues that we were seeing in the Super Mario images. And so we're going in we can tell just from looking at this, a feeling just occurs to us, even if we don't have the words to explain it. We know how it feels, right? And so similarly, I wanted to give an example that's actually from a comic book, which is a little bit closer to what we're doing. And so these are both images of a car, right? And we're seeing, in both cases, it's kind of moving pretty straight. The panel shape is very boxy. It's the two rectangles. So it feels, the car is moving quickly, but it looks like just a normal car, right? But then if we compare it here, what are ways we can tell that this image, the car is moving a lot faster?
just say it. And there's a line, little light. Yeah, that's describing the.
Well, you can
The
see
colors.
the fire coming up off of the wheels.
The people screaming inside of the car because of the immense speed.
You can also see how it shows you the force. Kind of shows you the force.
Yeah, that's awesome. So we're looking at some of the stuff Claire already talked about, right? We can see that the characters look really scared. We can see those motion lines. And again, the way that that we're being led around on the page shows us these scary lines that show us it's a lot more intense than we were looking at before. And we're already, again, starting to think about color. And so that's a little bit what I want to get into with more detail with the last time that we have. And so this is, again, I'm going to be asking a lot of questions. So I appreciate that you're willing to chat with me on this. Have you learned about colors before, the idea of warm colors versus cool colors? Is that something you're familiar with? Okay, I see some hands. In Burlington class, I see we've got some hands. Do you want to tell me what you know about warm and cool colors?
With like warm colors, that's for like making backgrounds and stuff. But then on cool colors, that's like where you can put more detail and stuff.
No.
That's interesting. You can do it that way. That's absolutely true. And the reason that you might use warm colors in the background and cool colors in like your foreground would be because there's a heavy contrast there, right? So you're totally right, but you could also do it the other way. You could do cool colors in the background and warm colors in the foreground because you'll get contrast and that'll separate the image because there's a lot of visual contrast between the colors. But I think was someone else starting to say something about how they?
Wrigley? Like warm colors are usually in like more, because they're more like vibrant. So they're usually used when there's like more like action going on, you know? Because they're more like vibrant than cool colors. And cool colors, I'd say, when you have like purple, blue, that kind of stuff, it usually signifies I don't know the word. Yeah. It usually symbolizes like calm or like sad. So like not really doing much, but more so like in a calm moment.
Oh, that's amazing. You're already so advanced. I thought on this slide, we were just going to talk about how warm colors are like light. They feel warm. They're like fire, whereas cool colors are more like wintry and they're colder. But you're already ahead of me. So for folks who maybe haven't had this same level of exposure to these ideas before, I just want to take a moment to we don't have to go through every color, but if you want to start to write down different ways that you feel for these 6 colors. So like red, think for a moment if you want to chat with each other about the kinds of things that red can mean. If you see red in an image like the one on the screen, what does that make you think of?
It's like the colors like danger, and it's like a color that makes you feel warm, and it has like different meanings. It can mean like danger, it can make you feel warm, it can make it yeah.
Absolutely. But the other words we might think about, like angry, like we talked about before, it can mean passionate. There's lots of different things. And that's great to start thinking about the different kinds of things. We're going to talk about that in a moment as well. How about blue?
Blue, blue is more like a sad.
Yeah,
it's cold. The blue is like a relaxing color because it's like the kind of the color of water, and yeah.
Yep, that's awesome. So you're right. It can be sad, it can be calm, which can be 2 related ideas, but can be very different, right? And it can be cold, but it can be kind of calm, it can be lazy, it can be all kinds of things, but those are all totally correct. And then last one we'll talk about immediately, but you can start to think about the other ones if you like, would be yellow. What does that make you think of?
Happy.
Happiness and like the sun.
Because like I feel like the sun has an effect that makes you happy, like because you're sad on a rainy day, but happy on a sunny day.
Absolutely, that's totally right. But yellow, you'll think, is also used in a lot of warning signs, right? If you see a sign on the side of the road, or you see a sign that there's something dangerous being kept somewhere, we can use yellow to also mean a warning, right? So it can mean something that's very happy and warm and inviting, but it can also be a little dangerous depending on the context where we're seeing the color, right? And so, as I say, if you want to think about these other colors, just in the interest of time, I'm going to keep us moving a little bit, but we can already start to see that there are colors that on their own can mean certain things to us. But the important thing to think about when you're making a picture is how those colors can work together. So again, I'm going to show you some collections of colors, and you can start to tell me how they make you feel. So in this case, how does this blue feel? This particular blue, what does that feel like to you?
water or sky blue.
Like that one Gatorade
Yeah, we're thinking it's kind of it feels like water. It feels a little bit sad. Does it feel a little bit cold maybe with the white and the gray? So what if I show you, this is the same blue, but how does it feel now? Does it feel different? I think some of your classes are muted, so if I'm talking over anyone, I'm sorry, but I can see that we're all talking to each other, which is what we want to be doing. But the hope here is now this feels more like a sky on a sunny day, right? When we put it with this very warm yellow and a warm brown, now the blue doesn't feel as sad as it might have in the last image, right? It still might feel like water, it still might feel like sky, but it feels like a sunny day because we've put it next to these other warmer colors. Now we're gonna keep the same yellow, and I wanna know, how does the yellow feel now compared to the other image that we just saw?
Warning.
Sunset.
Danger.
Sunset.
Danger.
Sunset.
Warning. Duck. Caution.
It looks like the Spanish flag.
It looks like cautious.
Like that one duck.
Yeah. Caution.
McDonald's.
McDonald's, absolutely. But you're right. So I heard sunset, which is great. I didn't actually think about that, but you're totally right. But yeah, when we combine the yellow with the black, which makes it much more dramatic, right? Than when it was with the blue, it really comes right at you. And I added the red in there as well, just to add a little bit more contrast to make the yellow really come forward. And I'm not sure, you didn't explain that as much, but when you have, here you can see really strong contrast between the yellow and the black, right? And so if you're looking at this picture, the yellow feels like it's coming toward you, right? It's coming out of the image. And so you can use heavy contrast. You don't have to use it with black, but you could use yellow with a dark purple or a dark green, for example. And because the other darker color will move further away from you, it'll go into the background. The brighter, more vibrant color will come forward. So you can use contrast like this in your own images when you want to show that something is important. So maybe something is smaller. If there's a person who's small compared to a bigger background or a bigger item or something. Again, let's say maybe we want to show Michel in one of the cars or Michel in the forest. Even if he's smaller, then we can make him a more vibrant, bright, light color, and he will be more noticeable in the picture than the dark background.
Just in case anybody's not very familiar with the idea of contrast, just to put it very simply, high contrast is when two things are very different. And that might be in shape, size, color, it might be anything, but contrast, the levels of contrast are about how different two things are when they're next to each other.
Yes, that's a great point. Thank you, Claire. So again, I'm just going to show that red. That's the same red we had in the last image. How are we feeling about the red now next to the purple?
So luxurious.
It looks like kind of like warm and loving.
Yeah. Warm.
It feels for some reason
Reminds you of that.
it looks like white color. It looks like the flag of something. It looks like a one.
Yeah, my hope was this one kind of felt Valentine's Day, right? It's really warm, it's really loving, it's really passionate. And this is going to be the last one, and then we can wrap up and see if anyone has any questions. But again, keep your eye on the purple. Now, how does this feel? What sort of characters would you associate with these colors?
Villainous.
Beast Boy. I think it's the Joker from Batman.
Yeah, Joker.
It's some
Toy Story.
Yeah, the Joker, absolutely. There's a whole bunch of Disney villains that use these colors. But again, we're using the exact same color of purple that we just saw with the red, but when you put it next to the green, it feels completely different. So the reason we're showing you these things is just to get you thinking about the ways that you can use color to show a feeling, but then think about how you can put other colors next to it that, as we said, contrast, that feel very, very different, or maybe feel similar to evoke a feeling in the people who are looking at your pictures.
Yeah. Do we have any questions now?
Let's say if we've got questions that we can have, like we've done before, just have a student come up to the camera so that way we know, or you can put it into the chat. I know one question I have off the top of my head is we're starting to transition to how we're going to storyboard this idea out into 10 pages. And something that I hadn't thought about until this session. And I'm just curious from your guys' angle if it's too much or the wrong timing. As we storyboard, should we also consider like our color palettes and looking for flow across the 10 pages, or does that come later within the process? I know last year we didn't really consider color until we got into what we were going to do, but now I'm thinking like the emotion or the ride as we storyboard, should we also think about some of those key colors we want on each page, or is that too much too soon?
I don't think that's too much too soon. As soon as you can start thinking about things, the sooner your process becomes whole. Because as cartoonists, you're creating an image that's full of many different elements, and you want to bring them all together. So early on in your process, when you're drafting, things will be quite loose. You'll be thinking, which scene do we want to include? How does he sort of feel? What will come next? Like big, vague ideas. And if you can think big and vague about color as well at that same point in time, then you've got a greater foundation on which to build the details as you go through the series and the process in the weeks of deciding which part of that scene and which characters should be in it and what the focus should be and what they should be wearing and how they should look and whether there should be a clock in the background. The further you go, the more detail you can add, but that means that the sooner you start with the different concepts that are involved, then the more prepared you'll be.
Other questions that we have, I mean, process is learning, know where we are in our learning journey. This holds true for any other class. There's questions that we want to know. I've got a few minutes with two people that know what they're talking about.
Yeah, I know we just threw a lot of information at you.
We did.
So. I know you might have to think about it for a little bit, but even if you have specific questions about any of the elements that we discussed, now would be a great time that we can start to think about them. But we can also answer questions next time.
Yeah, we can start thinking about how we might apply some of the ideas we've been talking about to the story that you're working on. So how about we do that? And if anyone does have a question, just raise that hand and interrupt and that'll be fine. So for example, Allison pulled out this example from Michel's story of him having to leave in the night in only his socks. And well, Allison, why did that detail stand out to you?
I mean, we can talk to the class about that a little bit, but I was thinking that that puts you in the position to put yourself in Michel's place, right? We know what that feels like, what socks versus shoes feel like, and we can imagine if it's nighttime. If it's any time, unless it's warm in the summer, you don't want to go outside without your shoes.
Right.
But I was thinking that makes Michel feel very vulnerable, right? Because he's not properly prepared. He doesn't have all the things that he needs. He's going to be uncomfortable. We can imagine what that might feel like if he has to go through mud, or he has to go through the forest, or he has to go through snow. So that is a way that we can put ourselves in his position. But I was wondering, maybe, I don't know if anyone else has any ideas, if that's something that if you included that and you saw a picture of someone without their shoes on, how that might make you feel.
Yeah, he would be rushed. He would feel rushed too, which is something that I think we can all relate to.
Yeah.
Having to do things before we're ready. So because there are all those different elements of feeling in that scene, in that detail, that's something that stood out to Allison, to me, and that kind of thing is the kind of thing I think that you should be looking for when you look at his story, those kinds of details that stand out and really make you feel, oh, I can imagine what that feels like, or even I know what that feels like. Because the more that you know about the things that he experienced, not in the specifics, but in the ways that they made him feel, in being afraid, or being worried for people, or having to leave all of a sudden, the more you can relate, the more you know about how it feels. And so the more that you can imagine ways to make a picture look like how that feels.
Yeah, I think that's a really key detail. We've been trying to kind of process all the different facts and information, but how do we not just regurgitate, make it feel like an entry, in an encyclopedia? I know, but and truly more of a story. And I think you hit on something key for us is we continue to come through that. Where are those elements that we can go to really hiding the connection for the reader, but still holding true to obviously time and space of the stories evolving.
Exactly.
Glad you brought that up. That's something that we've been trying to kind of sift through here a little bit. Where are those moments and
the important thing to really remember when you're creating is that a reader is just like you, because you have read things, you've had experiences with stories, and you found them exciting or you found them boring. So the things that you find exciting in this story are what you should make the story about, and the things that you found boring, maybe you don't need to put those in because you didn't enjoy hearing about them, so why would anybody else? You're really no different from your audience. So thinking about, like, if perhaps now already there are scenes or moments in the things you've heard about Michel's life that you remember, that stand out to you, that you've thought about more than once, those are where you should start. Are those things that really tell the story? If you all say maybe right now 10 of you have a moment in mind that really made you think, oh, I know how that feels. If you put those 10 moments into one story, would that tell the story that you're trying to tell? Would that get the whole plot across, all of the events? Maybe they would. Maybe you already, between you, have the pages that you need to be working on. Maybe not, but you probably have at least some of them, and you definitely have something to work on and to start with, and to think of how you can incorporate those bits that you did relate to into the pages that you end up with. So just don't, creating things can be very intimidating. Trying to tell a story to someone, you can feel very nervous and very much like you don't know how to do it, but you do, because you know what is interesting, and you know what you like to see, and you know what you would want to tell someone about the things that have happened. So all you have to do is do it.
Just that simple.
It really is.
Well, I want to be respectful of your time. I don't see anyone looking at the screen here, so I think we're at a point where I know we want to let you have your day's time. We've already been with you for close to an hour, and we've got some processing to do, and you get us a lot to think about as we are all starting to enter that storyboard. So I think as we start to get into this, a lot more questions will emerge, but I think you've opened all of our eyes to thinking through storytelling. It's new ways that we haven't considered yet. We haven't been ready for it, but I think we are. So we're really thankful for both of you to share your insights and your knowledge. Those examples were really helpful. And I think it's going to make, I know it's going to make a huge impact to progress to a really great finished piece. And we're also looking forward to connecting with you guys again here in a very short time. Again, we start to think about the cover and maybe some feedback then on our storyboards we can share with you, and see where that conversation goes, where it's more interactive.
Well, I think we're both very excited to see what you come up with.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Awesome. Well, we thank you for your time, and this has been super helpful. But we'll definitely be in touch, and looking forward to our next session.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.